Next up, I want to talk about what is the halving and what you need to know to best prepare yourself for the craziness that's about to happen in the next few months. I found this great article on Fortune Crypto that kind of gives us all the things we need to know to prepare ourselves for the halving that's coming up. What is the halving? What's going to actually happen? It says for every 4 years, Bitcoin undergoes a halving. The article says it cuts the daily supply of newly minted coins by 50%. That's not necessarily true. It's more that it's 50% harder to mine the Bitcoin. If a ton of people are still mining Bitcoin, they're going to be mining Bitcoin, but at a 50% slower pace. So it doesn't really necessarily cut the supply by 50%. It just makes the ability for these miners to actually mine a Bitcoin 50% harder. It says Bitcoin has already climbed 60% this year, reaching all-time highs of over 72,000 in March. This has been driven by investors flocking to newly launched ETFs that allow them to buy Bitcoin in the form of shares on stock exchanges. But it's also likely because markets know diminished supply from the halving could rally demand, and if history repeats itself, Bitcoin could outdo its 2021 bull run by a significant margin. And I agree with that. That's why I think we could see the $68,000 price go to $85,000 or $95,000 by the end of the year. But since we've already seen a new all-time high before the halving, things might play out a little different. Just because a lot of the demand for Bitcoin has been met over the last 6 months. Once these ETFs got launched, people already started running the pile in. It's not like the last halvings when these ETFs didn't exist. Now that they do exist, we don't know what the demand's going to be like after the halving. We could even see a little bit of a crash pullback, like a flash pullback, for a couple weeks, and then before we see a big run up. I do think it's going to run up because supply is not going to be there. It's 50% harder to mine new Bitcoin, and Bitcoin, obviously by this price running up, it's hard for them to meet the demand of all the people and funds that want to buy Bitcoin. What is the halving? Every time a new block is added to the Bitcoin blockchain, the contributor is given some Bitcoins as a reward. This block reward initially consisted of 50 Bitcoins, but due to a feature of Bitcoin's code, the amount is cut in half every 4 years. Previous halvings saw the block reward cut to 25 Bitcoins, then to 12.5, then to the current allotment of 6.25. The halving set for April will see the reward cut to 3.125 Bitcoins for the same amount of energy and work. That's why people like Kathy Wood think Bitcoin can go to like $500,000, $600,000 per coin. And philosophically, and if you just run the numbers mathematically, it's very easy for Bitcoin's numbers to get over $500,000 per coin. So far, there's been 3 Bitcoin halvings: November 28th, 2012, July 6th, 2016, and May 11th, 2020. Will the halving go on forever? It says no. The reward will continue to diminish until it reaches 1 Satoshi, equivalent to 0.0000001 Bitcoin. Bitcoin's source code will only ever produce 21 million Bitcoins. The majority, about 19 million Bitcoins, have already been mined. So that only leaves about 2 million Bitcoins left to be mined. But over the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years, it's going to be considerably harder to mine Bitcoins. And they estimate this process is going to continue until 2140. I will be super dead by that point, so that doesn't really matter to me. But in the short term, I think 2024, we could see Bitcoin between $85,000 and $100,000, and then in 2025, up to around $200,000, in my opinion, before we start to see another pullback, which will take us, say if we're at 200,000, probably back down to that 100,000 per coin-ish range, giving 10 or 20,000 on each side of the coin.